All right. Well, I am Rachel Elder and I'm here with Dionne Miller. We are the couples therapists with Connected Couples Counseling. And we thought it might be fun to do a little intro into who we are and then dive into some of the behind the scenes of the therapy world about licenses and degree programs and the differences and similarities and how we work with couples and our background. So we'll start with more formal introductions. So Dionne, will you introduce who you are, your license title?
Sure. Hi, I'm Dionne Miller. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist associate.
Yeah. And I'm Rachel Elder. I'm a licensed mental health counselor. And we both work with couples and individuals, primarily virtually. Dionne, you're fully virtual right now. I do 1 day a week in person in West Seattle on Wednesdays and then virtual all the rest of the days, Monday through Friday. Let's go into just so people understand. You're a licensed marriage and family therapist associate, and I'm a licensed mental health counselor. Let's talk about the difference of our backgrounds or our titles per se. So, what does it mean to be what we call an LMFTA?
So, in for marriage and family therapists, we are very systems based. So, we look at what's going on with, let's say, a couple, and we look not just at what's going on with the couple, but we look at their family of origin. We look at the stories they've been told about marriage, the stories they've been told about their roles, their culture, and things from their religion and all of that, and we really kind of put all of those into how we conceptualize a case and how we help a couple.
Mhm. And I guess for me, I'm a licensed mental health counselor. So I used to have an A at the end of my title too as an associate. And part of it is the schools we choose to go to. So I chose a grad school that you got a degree as a master's in counseling profession. I should know this, but it's a MACP, the initials. And so my background had some systems. It wasn't a deep dive probably as your program was. My schooling was more focused on family of origin, trauma, abuse, and narrative psychology, which is also similar. The stories we tell ourselves, the stories we believe, how we make meaning and interact in the world. So for you, what made you choose a school where you would go and get a marriage and family therapist license versus a mental health counselor license?
I have always That's always kind of been my goal. I Being a mental health counselor wasn't even on my radar, to be fair.
Yeah.
I wanted to help couples. To kind of give a tiny bit of background, my parents had a ridiculously awful marriage, and I knew how that affected me. And I have since then gotten married and had a successful marriage. And so those two pieces really shaped that I wanted to help couples have successful marriages because I knew that it worked well for me. And yeah, I liked the topics, the relational piece that you get when you are a marriage and family therapist.
Mm, yeah, I think that's so interesting that you went in with the intention. A lot of people who do the marriage and family programs, it's kind of a mixed bag. They like the systems piece, or they want to work with family, they want to do couples, and in my experience, a lot of MFTs don't end up working with couples. Some do, but it is very unique work. It's different than individual therapy, and you went to school to, it sounds like strict, you do other work, but really to focus on couples, which is unique.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know in this realm that couples counseling is considered one of the most challenging realms of counseling because there are so many pieces going on.
Yeah. Yeah. I would love to learn more about that. I mean, we know that, but it makes sense, right? There's a reason the divorce statistic is so high and continues to rise because two people coming together being creating space to be themselves authentically and genuinely, and then working together with the vision, it's a lot of hard work and effort. And we see that constantly in our room. Yeah.
I'm constantly reminding my clients they are two different people with two different backgrounds, with two different cultures, with two different expectations, and they bring all of these pieces to the table and they are wonderful. And how do we create and blend those pieces together to create their family culture?
Yeah. Yeah. It's complex work.
It is.
I think it's interesting knowing that you went straight into it because I had a different route. So I went from undergrad straight to graduate school. But in my undergrad, I pursued business and psychology, which is proving to work really well today. But it was really either like go get a master's in business or go work for a business or go get a master's in counseling or do something that similar to counseling, but not the full realm of it. And so I think I chose a program more for where it was located than necessarily like a focus. I liked the school I chose. I liked that it was kind of about storytelling. I liked that it was in Seattle where the summers are beautiful. But I didn't necessarily realize what I was choosing with the grad school. It was more of, can I afford it? What are the expectations? I never really thought about the long term. What do I want to work with? Who do I want to work with? I had a sense of like college students for a long time, and
Mhm.
that was my narrow focus was to pursue an internship working at a college, then moving into college counseling or college admissions. And I didn't end up going that route. I pursued it and had an opportunity, but turned it down to actually work with children and adolescents and found myself loving that. So I actually didn't work with couples probably for the first 3 years of my career.
Wow.
And I always wanted to. So in grad school, I took all the classes I could. In undergrad, I did research projects on relationships. So there was always something there. I'm a hopeless romantic. I, I was more of a nerd. So I was like in my room writing love stories where I was the main character growing up. I was matchmaking with my friends. So like relationships were my thing, but I wasn't great at them. So it was always there. And it wasn't till I just kept finding myself like, is there opportunities to do this? And, I got to dabble a little bit, but working with children and adolescents, the focus really is on children and teens and their family, not necessarily the parents' relationship or the caregiver's relationship. And so I just, in every setting I worked in, kept asking and finally just decided if I'm going to do my own practice, I want to do it focus on couples. So then I took additional trainings because my school really didn't have a lot and then kind of just opened up my doors and took the risks, hoping I would love it, that I would be able to get established and do it well. So I think this is fun for me because it's two different paths. And I think behind the scenes, sometimes people look at my background and they're like, oh, Rachel's been practicing longer and she's not an associate. But I was at one point, and when I was an associate, I wasn't working with couples at all. And really my path to being a couples therapist was just kind of putting a shingle up and saying, like, trust me and work with me. I'm passionate enough to do this. Versus you were very focused of I'm going to go do this work because of what I experienced growing up, the kind of marriage I've been able to establish from that, which is huge.
Right?
You
30 years
wanted,
almost.
yeah, and you wanted to have impact. So
Yeah.
I love this because it's highlighting the backgrounds of couples therapists are on a spectrum, variety. But I think what's important is that there was a passion and purpose for each of us.
Agreed.
I had a roundabout way. You were very like, this is my path. And it's
Yeah.
working out.
Yeah. When I was in grad school, because I knew that I was going this path, I did the first two levels of Gottman while I was still in grad school.
Yeah.
So that when I was in my practicum, I could see couples and actually feel semi-competent. I know when you're in your practicum, you don't necessarily you have a big case of imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
So this really helped me because I felt like I could speak to it. And the more I dig into it, the more couples I work with, the stronger you feel and the more you understand. And of course, since that point, I've taken a whole lot more training. in both couples and also in some of the individual modalities, so that because I realized that as part of couples therapy, we have you have two individuals,
Yeah.
and they may struggle with anxiety, they may struggle with depression, they may have a personality disorder, they may be neurodiverse. And so working with all of those different people as individuals and taking as much training as I can so that I can help the individual in the room to be that part of the couple.
Yeah. I think this is good to talk about of right. Couples counseling has some of the generic's not the right word, but kind of the overarching communication, conflict, connection themes. But in that then is who are the two people sitting in front of you? What are the other relationships that have impacted them and their story and their mental health background, their personality, their characteristics, then the other person as well. And so we might have these tools and skills we implement with almost all of our couples we work with, but every couple we work with, we are looking at who are you and how does this integrate or how do we make this work for you? It's
Mhm.
not the come to us and we walk you through everything that we do with everyone. There's a part of that, but it's, if we're thinking about like your school journey and mine, there's a path forward, there's a process, but there's this intertwining weaving out that happens
Right.
because we don't really know what's coming forward and the hopes and goals they have versus what we see is going on in their dynamic. We've got to find a way to merge it all together.
Mhm.
I also liked that you were saying that you did like even more training. And I think that's, behind the scenes of being a therapist. You can't be a therapist without a master's or a PhD or
Yes.
doctorate. It depends on what route you want to go, but you have to go and get a master's at minimum to be a
Mhm.
therapist. You have to graduate to begin to pursue a license in therapy. And in our school experience, we are required to do internship or practicum or both. A lot of schools do both nowadays. So not only are we having to write papers, read books, learn about the skills, we then have to practice the skills, sometimes on one another, which is a controversial subject, but often on one another or with the relationships in our life. And from there, we then have to finish an internship year, which
Mhm.
requires us seeing, I don't know how many you had to see. I think my hours were a lot less than an MFT,
Right.
but I had to be in an internship for about 9 to 10 months.
Mhm.
And I had to do like 500 direct service hours, maybe
Oh
a
wow.
little bit more, but it is significantly less than what you had to do. Because an MFT has to do how many direct
It's
service
like
hours?
300, and it's 300 direct. And then of course you have uh hours of supervision. You have hours where they have to watch how you're interacting within the session. So there's a lot of parts and pieces to it.
Yeah. And an MFT, you have to have a certain amount of relational hours, right? Which is the
Correct.
couples or family
Yeah.
or triadic. I don't know what it is.
It, yeah, dyadic.
More than just individual. You have to have a certain category of hours and that
Right.
part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like usually 100,
Yeah.
I think, 100,
Yeah. So that's another difference with our backgrounds is that you actually had to see what couples or relational therapy was.
Mhm.
Whereas I didn't have to have that at all. I could do it, but really all I had to do was see one-to-one clients to get my hours.
Yeah.
So then let's talk about the difference when we graduate. We then have to apply for a license, which is
Uh-huh.
either a licensed marriage family therapist associate, licensed mental health counselor associate, licensed, I always get the social worker one,
Yeah, I license it's
social work associate, something like that. I
something,
didn't do
yeah.
that realm. So we finally graduate. We have this degree that we have invested lots of time, finances, energy into. And then we have to dedicate even more
Yeah.
time, finances, and energy into getting fully licensed, which is the difference between us right now. I have a fully licensed
Mhm.
license in Washington State, and you have an associate license.
Right. I'm about halfway done with my getting my associate hours. You have to have a minimum of 500 couple hours and 1,000 hours of client contact, whether it's all couples, all families, individual couple, family, whatever, as some amalgamation, and 3,000 hours total.
Mhm.
And then you also have to pass the it's the AMFTRB, which is the big national exam for all marriage and family therapists. And so I'm working on studying for that because it's an adventure.
Yeah. And in addition to those hours, you also have to be supervised while you have an associate license.
Yes. Yeah. Several hundred hours.
Yeah. Yeah. And so part of the difference where you and I are at, I was in that place when I was
Mhm.
working with children and adolescents. I had to have 3,000 hours too, but mine were, I think, 1,200 direct service, 100 supervision, and then everything else was like trainings, meetings, all the other pieces.
Continuing ed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we both had some similarities there. But where the difference is now is you are required to be supervised typically weekly or for like every 12 clients you see, typically you need an hour of supervision. I don't have to do that unless I want to. I'm biased, but I think most quality, healthy therapists are in some kind of supervision or consultation group, even when they are fully licensed. But there's a difference in how we work is that I get to choose that as an option where it's required for you.
Right.
And so for me right now, if my cases are having someone and supervision is really like someone coming in and helping us see how to better care for our clients, knowing what's our story that might get intermixed with our clients and how to separate and have those boundaries to help us develop our clinical self, our education, our knowledge, as well as listening to our code of ethics and our legal parts of our work. And then in some settings, right, the business side or paperwork side of
Mhm.
therapy. I get to make a choice if I have someone walking alongside me with my cases. I make that choice because I think it's important, but you are required, which is
Yeah.
very different. That means every week or every 2 weeks, and I think you said hour and a half every week.
I average an hour and a half a week. Yeah.
Yeah, you're averaging an hour and a half
Supervised.
every week. You have two supervisors, so you're getting two different perspectives, two different backgrounds, looking over the work you're doing to provide the best care for your clients.
Mhm. And I
And
love it.
the reason I'm making a big deal about this is because we know this in our line of work, and we're doing this today to maybe educate and teach people about what it takes to become a therapist and what's the differences with the titles, is that it's way different to have another set or multiple sets of eyes on the care you're doing. We're still being protective of confidentiality, but we
Mhm.
are coming into these sessions of supervision and looking at here's what's going on in this case with this couple, and this is where I'm getting stuck. Or, was this the right approach? Is there a different modality? Is there a better way to support them? You are required to do that. And this is where I always say associates, I think, are sometimes even better than fully licensed. I think it's a both and,
Mhm.
but the energy and the drive you have to get your license makes you show up to your work a little bit differently. And the extra support and eyes on the work you're doing is different than fully licensed. Now, the fully licensed, we have the years experience that's different from associate, but that doesn't necessarily bring in our lived life experience differences. Um, and there's kind of the stigma of like, well, I've been in this case, I've been in the field for 7 years. I must be more established and better therapist than you. When really there's no evidence that supports that. And it's not always true.
Mhm.
Because I know for myself is that I've been in this field long enough that I sometimes get burnt out. And when I'm burnt out, I know how that impacts the work I do or how I show up. I do a lot of work to reduce that. It took a long time and still is a work in progress. But sometimes my purpose and my passion, that flame gets dwindled
Mhm.
some. And so I'm biased because I'm a supervisor. In this case, we do supervision together, but I truly believe those coming into the field, they are more curious about learning. They are more excited. They're seeking out opportunities. And I think sometimes they really look at their cases more in depthly than sometimes therapists in the field who have been doing it a long time, who
Mhm.
are burnt out, who are trying to find that balance of how to do good clinical care while also supporting their life and also turning off the hat of therapy for themselves. So I don't know I mean, I'm really kind of like amping up associates, but I'm curious your perspective being an associate versus seeing fully licensed. What do you see?
That's a great question. So, first of all, I think um, the number one most important piece in whether you're an associate or a fully licensed is probably building rapport.
Mhm.
If you build that rapport with your client, that is that is the end all be all that really really helps cement whether therapy is going to work. And we know that. We've researched the snot out of it. The other piece as far as that, I completely agree. I think sometimes as an associate, because you haven't done everything, you may try 20 different brand new interventions that your more seasoned supervisor, because your seasoned supervisor has kind of got into their, I know this one, I know it works. And they usually are right. But it's a lot of fun to like, oh, I've got this great new intervention and I want to try it. And so sometimes we find one that really, really, really works. And so we, kind of get to help our supervisor in the end kind of get some new skills. The other piece, I think, as far as being a new an associate, I spend a lot of time prepping. I definitely don't, kind of put it on cruise control where like, oh, this client has this, so I know exactly what I'm going to do. They're going to get a much more, like, I've really prepped for you. And if we go in a different direction, that's great. But at least I've done my prep. So I have yeah, some feeling that if we go in this direction, I've got good stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good, like for me, I'm like, oh yeah, like I could be so much better at prepping sometimes. And I used to prep very intentionally, and I still do in ways, but it's that like going back and looking how I began. I'm like, oh yeah, there's some pieces that I'm not always, or I can see that cruise control piece come into play. And I'm like, oh shoot, right. Like this is important work. And I feel so honored to get to do it. And yeah, I'm human got my
Hmm.
own life happening behind the scenes. And so that impacts sometimes that ability to really show up in the best way that I can. And I think that is the challenge for all therapists of how do we care for ourselves well and the other people in our life and our clients. And they get intermixed, they get separated, and it's just an ongoing struggle I think we all face.
It is. It's
Yeah.
hard sometimes.
Yeah. So another piece you were talking about this earlier about the continuing education. So another kind of behind the scenes of being therapists is that even after we graduate, even after we get fully licensed, we are still required to do continuing education. And it's about, for me, it averages 18 hours a year. I don't know if this is the
It's
same for
this
MD. Yeah.
with 6 hours of ethics every 2 years.
Yeah. Yeah. So we are constantly learning new skills, doing trainings. I'm looking at my little corner of my desk and there are 4 books on couples to the right of me right now. The learning and the education never stops. And that is required for associates and fully licensed.
Mhm.
It's never ending. And so I think that's a difference too of sometimes people look at associates or not a difference, it's a similarity people will look at associates and be like, well, you just don't have enough background or training or knowledge or experience. And sure, maybe in some ways, and like fully licensed are still having to do the same thing as associates. We just don't have to carry the A in our title anymore. And we can say we've been doing this work for a certain amount of time but that doesn't always mean we've been doing the work as best as we can or with all the education and skills we need. And so it's another similarity. The title doesn't change how much effort, energy, or time is needed, other than you've got a certain number of hours you have to collect to get that A off your title.
Hmm. Yeah.
Are there anything for you as an MFT that once you don't have the A, the associate at the end, that you have more freedom or ability to do certain things? What are those
Yeah.
things?
So, for a lot of, like you mentioned the continuing ed, for a lot of continuing ed, you cannot become certified in your studies. So
Oh, I didn't know
I've
that.
taken a really good amount of training on becoming a sexually informed couples therapist, but I cannot become certified in that until I have the A gone.
What? I'd never heard this before.
Yes, yeah. If you do it through Evergreen certifications, you have to be fully licensed.
I don't like that, but
I
I'm very
don't
also like shocked to hear that.
I don't like it either. Yeah, I think
Huh.
I was able to, like, because I took the DBT training and I could keep that. But yeah, there's all kinds of training that you cannot be certified in until you're fully licensed.
Hmm. And
Mhm,
when we get certified in a training, that just really means that we've done all the levels, we've done even some externship or more supervision hours
mhm,
on that modality.
mhm.
And so, right, people can be certified in the Gottman method or be level 1, 2, 3 trained. Certification just means you've done all of the training options available with additional supervision hours. And I will add this part, additional investment of your
Yes.
funds
Oh,
into
yes.
it. Yeah. And some certification programs in a model, similar like Gottman, I'm sure EFT, then allow you to go teach and train other therapists or conduct other pieces of that model that not everyone can do. So those are some of the other differences with being certified versus a
Right.
certain level in a model.
Yeah. Otherwise, there's not a whole lot of difference in what I can and can't do. Ethically speaking, I try really hard to protect my license. So I'm not sure. I'm sure there are some people who are a little more willing to color outside of the lines, but
Yeah.
I try really hard not to. Um, Otherwise, I work within my scope of competence and scope of practice, and that's
Yeah. So let's talk about that. How do you or how do us as therapists figure out what's in our scope of practice and what's not? What's your process for deciphering and deciding what that is for yourself?
yeah. So some of it is by our boards, our ethics boards. They very clearly line up. This is what you can and cannot do. And some of that's really the big thing. The other thing is if I have a question, I talk to you. I
Yeah.
talk to my supervisor. I talk to my other supervisor to get clarification. Is this an okay thing?
Yeah.
And if it's not, refer out.
Yeah. And part of our scope of ethics, right? We have our code of ethics, we have our boards that help us figure that out. Some of it is developed from our experience of doing work. There are certain diagnoses, certain personality characteristic dynamics that show up that maybe we can't work with as well as someone else.
Mhm.
And some of it is kind of passion and purpose too. Like, what do I do really well? What do I love that I can show up with that energy? That's, we really want those type of clients to work with. And that doesn't happen with every client or couple, but when we're working with clients where we're really starting to question our therapist self, if we're providing good care, if it's in our scope, that's normally our kind of, it's an intuitive but also educational piece, right? Of we're really looking at, is this a good fit? Right? I can't just work with you because I need to pay my bills and I have openings. I will preference there are therapy jobs that's kind of what happens.
Mhm.
And ethically, what we're really trying to do is make sure, can I show up well with this work? Am I knowledgeable and skilled enough? Right? Because we are always going to be learning more skills and more knowledge as a part of our field. So we're never fully a master at any of it. But is it my purpose and passion? Do I have the skills and background to do it? And do I have the support to help me navigate the case I'm working with too? Because sometimes that's what we need is that other set of eyes, the other resources, thinking in a different way to help us really do the work well.
Yeah.
Part of being an associate is learning the scope of practice.
Mhm.
I think sometimes people struggle to understand that and what that looks like. And there's a kind of a trial and error to it as well. And
Mhm.
when we say that, we're not just working with anyone and everyone, but we are listening in my case, right? All of my work was children and adolescents. I really didn't have much other than 2 classes in grad school about couples, but there was this constant energy in me of like, can I do this? I want to do this. I'm really interested. I'm really curious. I'm reading books about it. There's something that's driving me forward. And so part of our scope of practice is by listening to our instincts and our passion to figure out and explore, can I do this? And so I highlight that because I think when we're doing this, what's the difference? What's the same? We're
Mhm.
both constantly doing that. This is year 7 or 8, I think 7, I don't know, something like that, 7 or 8. I'm 5 plus, that's all I know. This is year 7 and 8, and I'm still learning what is in my scope of practice and what is not. And I think we always are going to do that as therapists because our interests, our purpose, our passion evolves and change with the trainings we're doing, with the stages of life we're in. And I think as an associate, you're just doing it a lot more because you are entering into the field
Mhm.
and you are meant to look at cases and be like, okay, can I step into that? Do I have the support to do it? And can I learn and develop? It
Mhm.
doesn't mean that you're throwing darts and just hoping it sticks. You are being very intentional in the choice you make, but you do need to have the opportunities
Mhm.
to really figure out what your niche, what your specialty is, what that passion truly is for yourself.
Yes. Because when you, at least for me, when I went into grad school, yes, I wanted to work with couples, but I had no idea that this was going to be, that working with neurodiverse couples in particular was going to become such a passion for me. I never realized how much I was actually going to like to work with families. I've had the opportunity recently to work with several families. I'm like, oh, I really like this too. This is a lot of fun. I knew I was really interested in working on sex therapy. So that wasn't a complete surprise, but helping and figuring out within that sex therapy realm, what is it that's interesting to me?
Mm-hmm.
And what lens do I want to take with that? And how do I want to move forward? So it's all been very much figuring out who I am and what my practice looks like.
Yeah. Let's go. This is more like a fun one, but who do you love working with? You said neurodiverse, but what is the work that really makes you light up?
Well, right now I'm super loving working with younger couples. Did not see it coming. I I do. I love working with my younger couples, helping them figure out how to navigate being newlywed. I really enjoy it. It's so much fun. I also, like I mentioned, I love working with my neurodiverse couples. It's there's patterns I see in those couples and helping them. I just worked with a couple recently and the wife came in after her husband had been diagnosed with ADHD and she was like, you saved my marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like one of those, yeah, I got a little teary-eyed. It was like one of those, okay, this is amazing. This
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
so
Are there couples or individuals that you tend to refer out more just because it's not purpose, passion, you don't feel like it's in your scope of practice?
a good question. Couples that I tend to refer out. Couples that have severe personality disorders, um, couples, if they were like one of the partners was experiencing maybe bipolar disorder or schizophrenia, something like that. Someone who's in active addiction, I would maybe not refer them out, but would definitely require some individual counseling and support in those cases. Uh, and that's kind of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, back to our differences, I used to love premarital. I still do it a little bit, but I have to remind myself it's good to just have light and easy couples work. But I'm so much more like year 5 into this of like, oh, this is normal, but I don't know this as much as like the couple's really struggling to have healthy conflict and really struggling to learn how to listen well. I like those couples who their communication and conflict skills feel they're not working. That's clear, but they're not working and they want to find something new. They're interested in changing. They have that growth mindset. I like a fair recovery. It's so hard and challenging work, and yet can be so beautiful. My school background with trauma, I tend to get the family of origin trauma or previous trauma and how that impacts relationships. And then the stage of life I'm in of being a parent to a young child, I tend to find myself in those kind of couples too of like, how do we do this well to be a good example for our kids and also keep a relationship intact while we work and while life is crazy and busy and all these things.
Yeah.
And I know you do you're like
I,
our bringing baby home expert in our
oh,
practice.
yes,
Uh,
probably why I like those young couples. It's
yeah.
those life transitions. Whether it is bringing a baby, new parenting, becoming empty nesters, or retiring and wondering who the heck your partner is across the table from you. Those are all fantastic opportunities
Yeah.
to work.
Yeah. From your perspective, what are the benefits to clients working with someone who's fully licensed versus who's not fully licensed?
Mm. Well, again, goes back to whether or not they connect with their therapist.
Hmm.
Uh, and then they've got more years of experience.
Yeah.
So there is that, and sometimes that is absolutely to their benefit. A fully licensed therapist, if you're a high conflict couple, maybe a fully licensed therapist that specializes in high conflict couples, or like you specialize in discernment.
Yeah.
So in that case, well, I've taken some discernment training for sure. It's definitely not fully within my comfort zone. So in that case,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I think the other benefit is if you're wanting to submit super bills or work with someone who takes insurance, typically they have to be fully licensed or for a super bill. It's changing. The insurance world is changing. Our practice doesn't take insurance to begin with, but we do provide super bills. Sometimes that's a benefit. I think the non people working with us benefits in our world is that more job opportunities. In some states, you can't have your own private practice as an associate. You have to work under someone else. Um, but there's just so many similarities, whether you've got that A or not.
There really truly is. Yeah.
Yeah. Why do you love being a therapist?
I love being a therapist because every day I get to help people who are ready for change be the change they want to be.
Yeah. And what's the hardest part about being a therapist?
Ah, there's some hard days.
Hmm.
There are some truly hard days where they're not sure they want to change, or they're not sure they want to continue living. And those are the hard parts, because I can't do the work for them,
Yeah.
and I can see them and provide them a safe, secure place to be, but I can't do it for them.
Yeah. Yeah, we really get to witness people in some of the darkest and most painful places. And we got into this field probably because we want to help and be witnesses and create belief that change in life is going to get better. And if you've ever held space for someone, if you're not a therapist, you've held space for a friend in grief, depression, darkness, you can imagine how hard it is to walk alongside them and move slowly and be patient as they journey with what they're going through. And I know for me, like sometimes I wrap up those sessions and just feel the hopelessness, which means we're really connecting. We have that rapport, but it can feel so hard to not shift it. And we want to go quickly a lot of the times because we want them to feel good and to recognize it. It's a balance of us teaching and guiding and coaching and educating, as well as the client or the couple being willing to grow and change and finding some sense of hope and belief in their process. We have our own and we get to extend it, but we can't force it or demand it on the other person.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
Hmm. I think what I love about being a therapist is that it requires so much creativity. I say trial and error all the time in my work, and I love that. I like this sense of like, I'm gonna test this out and see how it feels. And I may not love all of it, but I'm gonna pull it in the part that I love. And I like getting to do that with
Mhm.
individuals and my couples. And I mean, I'm just a hopeless romantic. Seeing people, it doesn't always play out this way, but seeing people be able to navigate challenge and hardship and find intimacy and connection and growth together is so beautiful to witness.
For
And I
sure.
think personally, it holds me so much, so accountable in my own marriage. There's so many sessions where I sit with a couple and they're having a conversation, and I'm like, oh no, I was you last night. And what I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to tell you how to do this differently or how to do this better. And now I have to go. I'm sure my husband loves this, but I have to go and be like, I'm really sorry that I said that or that I acted that way.
Mhm.
And here's what I'm going to do to be better. It's like the best benefit for me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want people to know about you as we wrap up today?
Um, hmm, I don't know. Um,
Okay. This wasn't on our
Probably,
list of questions.
yeah, no, I don't know if there's anything else. I think sometimes we talked a lot about like education and stuff, and I think sometimes what we don't talk about in becoming a therapist, and I think you um kind of mentioned in your exploration of your career, is my career was not a straight line to get here.
Yeah.
I majored in communication. I spent 15 years working in the graphic design corporate industry, and I did absolutely everything in a small business that was there. I was graphic production artist, I was an editor, I did a lot of training, fell in love with training stuff. And then I moved into a project manager role and an office manager role. And then I moved into human resources in this 15-year process. And at some point in there, I realized that the corporate world was not fulfilling to me on a very deep and personal role. I mean, it was great to work from home. I enjoyed that. It was when I was raising our two children, but it wasn't fulfilling. So I went back to school and I really wanted to become a marriage and family therapist. And this was back in 2008. But I was raising our two kids who were in their adolescence ages, and I was taking care of my elderly grandma at the time. And I did not have the time or the bandwidth to do all of those things. So I went and became a marriage and family, or not a marriage and family. I went and became a massage therapist, and I spent 8 years in body work. Loved it, learned a ton. I really loved that because it's really helped me kind of have that mindfulness, very grounded sense of who I am. And I also can speak on a pretty high level as far as like medical terms, which comes in really handy in this field. And then when COVID happened, I'm like an empty nester. And I'm like, who am I going to be when I grow up? And I've always wanted to follow this path. And it was either become a teacher of little people, because that's what I was doing at that point in my life, or become a therapist. Like, I want to be the therapist because I can make the biggest impact. And I
Mm.
knew I loved kids because they are such an amazing passion for me to be able to interact with them. But I knew that I could make the most difference for those children, like I taught every day, if I became a therapist and helped their parents become the best version of themselves for their kids.
Mm.
So that
I'm
was my answer.
I'm so glad because that was one of the questions I had and I totally skipped over it. And I just this is so normal for so many therapists. I feel like we're good balance of the spectrum. There are people who go to undergrad and straight into grad or PhD or master or doctorate. And then there are a lot of therapists where this is their second, third, fourth plus careers. And it's because something kept pulling them to wanting to have an impact and work with people. And I think that's what's cool about your story is that you were always with some kind of relational dynamic,
Mhm,
whether it was clients in the marketing or kind of business admin roles, but there was always a human resources, there was always the people part.
mhm.
And so I'm so glad that you shared that because I think it's so important. I am obviously biased. I love you and I think you are wonderful and I want the world to work with you because you're great. But I think this just highlights who you are and what you bring to the table is that, yes, you're an associate. And so there's that sense of like you're getting started later in life and that background, that purpose, the drive to impact people has always been there. And you've just been doing it in a variety of ways. And I think that's so relatable for so many therapists. Because
Yeah.
my grad program, I was filled with other people doing second, third. They were retired and wanted to come and have impact. It's
Mhm.
so many therapists, they come into the work at the right stage of their life.
Right.
When they feel ready, they are able to engage and do the work. And so I'm so glad you shared that.
Yes. How about you? Is there anything you want to share about you?
Oh, yeah, I hate when the questions get turned back on me. Well, I think, the one thing that I encounter sometimes in this work is people would like, I think you're too young. Or I even had my mother-in-law had a friend who said, like, I will never go meet with someone younger than me or has not lived as much life as me. And you can see my facial expressions. I'm kind of like, ugh. I was a little
I
upset
see that
about
vibe.
it. And I get it. Like everyone gets their preference. You get to work with who you want to work with, and you know who you can trust and build rapport and open up with. Absolutely want to honor that. And my age and how long I've been married does not determine whether I'm a good and quality couples therapist.
100%.
Yeah, my passion, my drive, my desire, my purpose for this work is what indicates my quality and expertise in this field. I'm blessed to have a marriage that allows me to do the guinea pig work and really hold ourselves accountable. I'm blessed to come from backgrounds where I've saw good marriages and healthy marriages, and I'm grateful that I was able to find this career early on in my life versus later on. But it doesn't, my age and my marriage years doesn't dictate whether I can do this work well, which
Yeah.
was the whole purpose of this call, was to talk about how we work and what's similar, what's different, and what allows us to do this work so well.
Right.
So thanks for sharing and being willing to do this, even though I'm kind of your boss and was like, please do this. But I think there's, as we've been saying, like there's so many different series that we might be able to do similar to this with this kind of behind the scenes look at being couples therapists and what it looks like to do this work. So hopefully we can circle back and do another one in the near future.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, if you are someone looking to work with one of us or just interested in couples therapy, feel free to send us an email at our admin at connectedcouplescounseling.com. We do consultations with clients. We help clients get connected to the right fit. So please don't hesitate to reach out. And hopefully, you'll be seeing more of Dion and I in these settings in the future. Have a great day if you're watching this.
Bye.
Bye.